Hi, welcome to Career Launcher. So finally the IIM Rohtak IPMAT exam has been conducted, and surprise to everyone, unheard of, we saw the exam being conducted on a Google form format actually. Yes, it was conducted on a Google form format actually. So students were provided a link to appear for the examination some 3-4 days ago, and they had intimated the students that this is how we'll be conducting the examination for IPMAT, which is for the selections to the 5-year integrated program at IIM Rohtak. So finally, after much delay, they tried conducting the examination in May, June, but because of some of the technical issues they faced actually, so they kept on postponing the dates, and on 20th July, the examination was finally conducted. Paper was not that difficult actually, so paper was on the expected lines. If I look at the quality of the question, if I look at the difficulty level of the questions, it was more on the expected lines if I compare it with the previous year's IPM IIM Rohtak paper actually. So on that similar lines, yes, there were few areas from maximum questions came in each of the sections, but that should not have surprised everyone except for the number of questions from particular topics. Otherwise, the level of paper was quite easier. Now, if I talk about the overall process of the examination, as I said, this was a very different format, the exam being conducted on a Google format, something which I have not heard of, something I'm sure you would not have heard of actually. That's probably being first time actually, especially for an entrance examination in the country. So that's a different aspect we are talking about altogether. The entrance also included for the first time the VAT section in the paper itself actually. So after the students completed the multiple choice questions, they were given a break for 15 minutes, and after that they were supposed to complete the written ability test exercise, wherein two very easy topics were given, I would say. One was post COVID-19 world, and the other one was what being successful means to you. So I'm sure if you talk about the VAT topics, they were not difficult. Students must have found it really easy. COVID is something which we all are now familiar with. We have been reading, we have been listening about it actually. So every day in the news we come across something about COVID, how it has impacted the world. So I'm sure every student who reads every day, who is into current affairs, would have definitely done a good exercise with this particular topic actually. So he or she would have a lot of data to talk about, to write about actually. And the other one was very subjective, so different people will have different interpretation about being successful actually. It is more about the thoughts how you would have expressed on the paper actually, but I'm sure all of you would have done a good job after having attended the different VAT sessions actually, how to write the essays. So I'm sure this was not a concern. Coming back to the MCQ paper, multiple choice question section. If I look at the past year format, the paper used to be 120 questions, 40 across each section. So 40 questions in quantitative aptitudes, 40 questions in logical reasoning, and 40 in verbal ability. But this time, because the paper was being conducted in a very different format, so they reduced the number of questions to 20 in each of the section with a total of 60 questions. But to the surprise, the time allotted was not in proportion to what it was in the previous year. So if I look at the paper of the previous year, 2019, one was expected to do 120 questions in 120 minutes, which means technically, if I look at it this way, for every question I had a minute to solve actually. But this year, the students were expected to solve 60 questions in just 45 minutes. And not to forget the fact that within that 45 minutes, one had to fill his or her personal details as well. So I'm sure that would have taken at least a minute or so to complete the process. So technically, if I look at, probably the paper was just around 43-44 minutes itself actually. Individually looking at each of the sections, this year, if I talk about the mathematics sections, which consisted of 20 questions, Not difficult, it was quite easy actually. If I look at the level of the questions, it was quite easy. But yes, this time the maximum number of questions came from permutation and combination actually. So that was a surprise element. There were at least 7 questions coming from this particular topic. And similarly, we had another 6 questions coming from averages actually. So these two topics almost had I would say 70% of this particular section. So that was a surprise element if I talk about. But overall, the difficulty level was pretty easy. One could have easily attempted somewhere around 13-14 questions. If one is good in calculations, maybe would have attempted 1 or 2 more actually. Now this would depend on the fact that whether you were able to start the paper on time, because I came across some students who could not log in on time actually. There were technical issues, they were not able to log in actually, so the site was not functioning properly. So they took almost 5-10 minutes to log in and start the paper actually, so they lost some valuable time out there. So as I said, if you had started the paper on time, probably you would have done a decent job in this particular section by attempting 13-14 section. That would have been a good attempt, no doubt about that actually. Similarly, if I talk about logical reasoning section, which followed the mathematics sections, the next 20 questions if I talk about, then if you look at the logical reasoning sections, again a bit of surprise out here. So quite a number of questions were in the form of the puzzles actually, but all the topics I'm sure students were familiar with. The questions based on blood relations and other areas they are mostly familiar with. If you talk about series, you have practiced a lot, so I'm sure I'm just looking at the time constraints, probably 14-15 decent attempt you would have definitely done. 14 and 15 attempt was definitely possible. It was all about time management. Verbal ability if I talk about, similar story. Verbal ability was pretty easy. No RC passage as such. There was a small passage on which there were 2 questions, but definitely most students came back to me and said, sir, it can't be considered as a reading comprehension passage. So more or less on the similar lines actually. It was a very similar story for the verbal ability section last year as well. So while they had 2 short passage given and some questions followed that actually, so this year that was the story. So the entire section was based on grammar and vocabulary. So that area dominated actually. But I'm sure you would have done a lot of practice with exams getting delayed twice actually, and you have got this a lot of time. So I'm sure each one of you have done your best actually. So now what's going to happen from here, where we go actually. So now the institute will evaluate the MCQ scores and your written ability test section. Post that, students will be shortlisted basis the performance in the written examination, your writing ability test exercise, and your personal past academic records, for which they have already assigned weightages. And based on that, they'll be shortlisting students for the next stage of selection process, which is online interview. So post that, the final merit list will be drawn. So new scenario we saw today actually. So if we talk about very different format of the examination, some glitches were definitely there. I'm sure you all have done a very decent job. You have done your best for the examination. Indore is still awaited. They are yet to announce the final date to conduct the examination. So I wish you all the best for the upcoming examinations. Thank you so much.